Your mind doesn't perceive reality, it constructs one. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago, and modern neuroscience is now tracing the same architecture. The gap between what happens and what you decide it means isn't philosophy. It's a trained portal. The protocol has 5 steps, and the first one takes a single deliberate breath. You'll leave with a 20-second reset that changes how you respond when chaos tests you. Welcome to the Mastery Files. I'm Marcus Vale, and here, ancient wisdom becomes modern discipline. Our purpose is simple. Become harder to distract, harder to break, and harder to fool. Build a mind that remains steady when the world does not. You have already felt this today, probably within the last hour. The mind reacts before it reasons. Your chest tightens before a conscious thought forms. That is where trouble begins. That sequence is reflex rather than choice, and reflex is the enemy of mastery. The mind doesn't wait for permission, and it labels, categorizes, and assigns blame before you finish reading the subject line. This happens in milliseconds, below the level of conscious awareness. If you don't interrupt it, the label becomes the truth. And that truth hardens into a reaction that becomes the day you just ruined, without ever choosing it. Epictetus put it plainly in the Enchiridion. He wrote that people are disturbed not by events, but by the judgments they form about those events. Picture a colleague dismissing your idea. The event is 30 seconds of criticism. The judgment is that your career is damaged and the room has turned against you. And Epictetus called that second layer the disturbance, because the criticism is external, while the collapse is internal. Marcus Aurelius practiced the same discipline. He told himself to examine the impression, strip away the story, and see what actually happened. While commanding armies and managing plague, he wrote these notes. He practiced the discipline in real time while the world burned, calling it dividing the thing into its parts, because doing that shrinks the catastrophe. This is the portal. Many of us live where every event arrives with a meaning we didn't choose. The portal is the choice to unpack it and ask what is actually here before the emotion hardens into action. It's the space between what happens and what you decide it means. And you can stand in that space and refuse a frame that destroys you. Consider James Stockdale in September 1965. He was descending beneath a parachute toward North Vietnam, knowing capture was certain and everything external would be taken from him. But at Stanford, he had studied Epictetus. He knew the division between what is under his control and what isn't. His body, his captors, and the torture weren't under his control, but his judgment was. That judgment would become his operating system. A tool philosophy supplied but survival demanded. He spent nearly 8 years in captivity, describing it as a laboratory where Stoic principles were tested. He never thought himself out of prison. He simply refused to let prison define his judgment, his identity, or his next move. The first step of the reset is simple. Pause and take one deliberate breath before speaking, sending, or reacting. The breath is a tactical pause, not meditation, and it buys you enough time to notice the story forming before you sign your name to it. People rarely enter the portal because they never pause long enough to notice it. They react at the speed of emotion and spend hours recovering. The cost of missing the portal isn't abstract. It's the argument you escalated, the opportunity you abandoned, and the sleep you lost. And all of it starts in the gap you walked past. Every piece of it could have been intercepted there. The portal is real, yet people walk right past it every day because they haven't learned to widen the lens beyond the immediate moment. That's the next skill. Marcus Aurelius had another practice he called the view from above. He would imagine himself rising high above the earth, looking down on armies, markets, weddings, lawsuits, and deaths. And he would picture the streets he walked from a mountain or a star. The noise of the court faded. The urgent letter became scrap papyrus. From that height, the crisis that consumed his morning shrank into a single moving dot. The perspective didn't erase the problem, it restored proportion. Researchers Ethan Cross and Igor Grossman ran 3 experiments with 693 participants, testing outside observer reflection on personal conflicts. We are trapped inside first-person narration. We say, "I am furious," instead of "he is experiencing anger," and the pronoun matters. When Cross and Grossman shifted that pronoun or shifted the perspective to a fly on the wall, the same brain faced the same facts and produced calmer, wiser decisions. And the distance perspective closed the usual wisdom gap while the effect held across age groups. Here's the view from above made measurable. When you step outside your own narrative, you stop performing the drama and start reading the script. The emotion doesn't disappear, but its grip loosens because you are no longer the center of the universe. You are simply one data point in a larger pattern. That shift isn't denial. It's strategic repositioning. Stockdale used this in prison. The captors controlled where he slept, what he ate, his isolation, and his physical conditions. They didn't control what meaning he assigned to suffering or what duty he chose next. He saw the prison as a single season in a longer existence. mentally widening the frame until his captivity became a single point in a larger human landscape. He saw other prisoners, other wars, other suffering. His problem didn't vanish. It found its proper size. The second step is C. Ask what a silent camera would record, ignoring interpretation, story, and every assumption that is an observable fact. The average person skips this step because the story feels true. A camera doesn't feel. It captures light and sound. When you force yourself into mechanical neutrality, you often find half the offense was never spoken, the rest inferred, and my boss humiliated me becomes my boss interrupted me twice in front of the group. The camera has no ego. It simply records what moved and what was said. That's your anchor. The third step is separate. Name the story your mind is adding. Perhaps it is that everyone thinks you are incompetent, or that this relationship is over. You don't have to prove the story false, only expose it as a story. Once you name it, you are no longer inside it. You are watching it. A story you can watch is one you can edit. Once named, it loses authority to command you automatically. But perspective isn't enough. The body still rebels. The heart races and the hands shake as cortisol floods the system before the mind can finish a single rational sentence. The portal holds only if you rehearse the storm before it arrives. Seneca wrote about another practice in his letters to Lucilius. In letter 18, he advised rehearsing discomfort so feared conditions lose power before a crisis, suggesting days of dressing plainly, sleeping on the floor, and eating simple food. The goal was to prove his happiness didn't depend on comfort. Once proven, the loss of comfort couldn't threaten his core. Worrying wasn't the point. He meant walking through the scenario, feeling the cold, hunger, insult, and realizing you can survive. This is negative visualization, and the Stoics used it as a preparation portal. Modern researchers tested a related idea in the lab. Jeremy Jameson, Matthew Knock, and Wendy Mendez ran a randomized experiment where participants were taught to interpret their stress arousal as functional and useful during a demanding task. The control groups experienced the arousal as a threat. Their blood vessels constricted. Their hearts worked harder with less efficiency. The reappraisal group was told their body was rising to the challenge. The result was striking. Compared with controls, those participants showed greater cardiac efficiency, lower vascular resistance, and less attentional bias. Yet the task didn't change. Their bodies responded differently because their minds assigned a different meaning to the same heart. Here's the pivotal fact. Two people can feel the same racing heart before a presentation. One reads it as proof of impending failure, while the other reads it as a body mobilizing resources for action. The first enters with tighter vessels and a narrower focus on threat, while the second enters with open vessels and a broader field of attention. And the heart pumping for both is the same. The physiology that follows is different. Both are nervous. Only one is functional. This is reappraisal, not positive thinking, and it changes the lived reality your body and behavior enter next. But this isn't a license to deny negative signals. Emotion regulation is flexible. If your body is signaling genuine danger, listen. If a relationship is toxic, reframing the insult doesn't mean staying. If a market is collapsing, optimism isn't a strategy. Some situations require acceptance, a boundary, or leaving rather than reframing, because the portal becomes a door you choose after assessing what is actually in front of you, not a trapdoor you fall through. Stockdale had rehearsed adversity before capture. He practiced voluntary discomfort and mentally walked through loss while he still had freedom. When the torture came, it was real, but it wasn't a surprise. The shock lost authority because he had lived through it in his mind. He didn't fantasize the prison away. He created a mental reality where the prison didn't get final say over what he believed, his duty, or his identity, which is why he led, communicated, and resisted for nearly 8 years. The fourth step is select. You ask what else this could mean, what is still under your control, and which interpretation produces your wisest next action, because the new frame must be both accurate and useful. It can't deny evidence merely to make you feel better. If the accurate reading is that your boss is incompetent and the project is failing, the useful frame gives you data you didn't have yesterday. Your next move is to document, escalate, or exit. The portal manufactures clarity, not sunshine. You now have 4 of the 5 steps. Pause, see the fact, separate the story, and select the frame. But the portal is no magic door you walk through once. It's a skill you build through repetition, and modern research on neuroplasticity shows how that building happens. The 5th step comes next, and it's the one that makes the other 4 stick. James Gross leads research on emotion regulation, mapping how changing interpretation changes emotional experience. His work shows the mind isn't a passive receiver of feeling. It's an active interpreter that can be trained. He identified reappraisal as one of the most effective strategies because it works early, stopping the response before it starts rather than suppressing it after the fact. Picture 2 people receiving the same harsh feedback. One hears an attack and the body prepares for damage, while the other hears data and the body prepares to adjust. The event is identical, but the neural path is not. Kevin Oxter and Jason Buell conducted a meta-analysis of 48 neuroimaging studies, and the pattern was consistent. Reappraisal engaged cognitive control and meaning-related networks, while modulating emotional responding. This means brain regions for meaning-making and executive control talk to regions responsible for emotional arousal. When you reappraise, you are rerouting the feeling rather than ignoring it. Doing it once is an act of will. Doing it repeatedly turns the pathway into a highway. Every repetition is a vote for that new road, and the votes add up faster than you'd expect. Brian Denny and Kevin Oxner took this a step further with a longitudinal experiment. Participants completed 4 sessions, and the results were clear. The distancing group showed the strongest results. They practiced stepping back and describing reactions as an observer would. That small shift in perspective, repeated across 4 sessions, produced a measurable drop in negative affect and less everyday stress than when they started. And they hadn't changed their jobs or finances, but they had changed their frames. And the frames changed their experience. This is neuroplasticity as learning, not magic, and it applies to anyone willing to practice. The nervous system changes through repetition and experience. A single breath won't rewire your brain. 4 sessions shifted the default response, and 8 years made the frame nearly automatic. Stockdale never reasoned his way out, but he kept prison from defining who he was, what he stood for, or what he did next. After enough repetition, that refusal became his default setting because he didn't decide to be stoic each morning, but simply was. The 5th and final step is step. Take one action that makes the new frame real. If you chose the frame that your boss wants better evidence, finish the argument and ask for his strongest objection. If you selected the frame that your body is mobilizing for performance, open your shoulders and begin. Without action, the frame is just a thought. The body needs proof. The new reality is real. One step is enough. It tells the nervous system the threat has been addressed and the resources can be redirected. That's how the portal closes the loop. The memory line is pause, see the fact, separate the story, select the frame, and step into it. Write it down because you'll need it the next time chaos tests you. This isn't theory for philosophers. It's operational psychology for anyone who leads, creates, or carries weight. The portal stays open, and the only question is whether you step through or let the current push you. For 1 week, practice the reset before every reactive moment at work, at home, or online. Aiming for awareness. Count how many times you caught the story taking shape before it controlled your reply. That number is your only progress metric. At the end of the week, you'll know exactly where your mind has been building realities you never chose. The world will keep happening, and your judgment doesn't have to happen to you. You're the gatekeeper of your own mind, not a passenger. Pause, see the fact, separate the story, select the frame, and step into it. Subscribe to the Mastery Files if you're building a mind that doesn't break under weight. And watch the next video on staying calm when pressure turns physical.